Dynasty Warriors Origins is the latest title in the almost 30-year-old Dynasty Warriors series. What started as a pretty run-of-the-mill 2D fighter eventually evolved into the 1 vs 100 Muso gameplay that this series would go on to be beloved for. While the Dynasty Warriors series has been around for a long time, it has been almost 7 years since the last mainline game, or 12 years since the good one has come out. Though Omega Force, the developers behind the series, have been making other games that use this iconic game style with the Samurai Warriors series or the licensed spin-off like Hyrule Warriors or Persona 5 Strikers and Berserk Band of the Hawk to name a few, for people like me wanting a new game set in the Three Kingdoms, it has been a long wait. But this game may not quite be exactly what I've been waiting for. Dynasty Warriors is well known for a few things. First is something that I already mentioned, the 1 vs 100 hack and slash gameplay. Second is the setting and the diverse cast of characters. Hang on, is it Dynasty or Dynasty? You're probably going to hear me say both during this video. It's like tomato, except I tend to fluctuate between the two just at random. Just like the fighting games Dynasty Warriors started out as, each new title in the series has just added to an ever-expanding roster of characters to play. So I was kind of surprised when in the marketing of this game it focused on one new, nameless character. Then we saw gameplay for the game, and while the 1 vs 100 gameplay looks like it is there, the core mechanics look like they had changed a lot. As a longtime fan of Dynasty Warriors, this new title is shaping up into something I wasn't really expecting, or something that I don't think I wanted. Will all these changes be for the better or worse? It's time to take a look at Dynasty Warriors Origins. For those unsure if this game was going to feel like a true Dynasty Warriors game, I can assure you that even though this game does make some strange decisions and changes, this is absolutely a Dynasty Warriors game at heart. And that is no more apparent than when you look at the gameplay of this game. This feels by far the best game in the series to play. The controls are tight, the fluidity of combos are great, but above all else, Dynasty Warriors Origins is able to up the scale of the gameplay to heights that the series has just not ever reached before. There are more characters on the screen, there are more cinematic moments, and this all builds up to making the battles feel so much grander, and in turn makes the gameplay feel so much more satisfying. I've played about 30 hours of this game as of recording this review, and I am still loving it. Now, initially going into this game, I couldn't shake this skeptical feeling that something was going to be really off with the game, and then the opening cutscene happened, and it wasn't great. But this is a good thing. Cutscene features some really cartoonishly, evilly written people, some terrible voice acting and bad lip syncing. It was just kind of awful.
This merchant has confessed everything. You had him purchase goods from corrupt scholars and sell them for you in the city.
But this is exactly what I wanted. Dynasty Warriors as a series is best described as kind of campy, especially with the cutscenes. It's like watching a badly dubbed late 90s anime.
Lord Meng-Hu, bad news! We're in trouble!
It's objectively bad, but it is kind of charming in its own way. Now, normally in a Dynasty Warriors game, there is a story mode where you can choose whatever character you like and then just complete a set of missions that play out where your character will realize their ideal ambitions during the war. There have been deviations in this formula over the years, but Origins is probably the biggest change to the story mode so far. In a normal Dynasty Warriors game, the first two missions are almost always the Yellow Turban Rebellion, then the Battle of the Hulao Gate. Then subsequent levels will change depending on what character or what faction's story you chose to play. What Origins does differently is that we only get one character to play, kind of. The Nameless Warrior, who looks like a generic anime protagonist. The Nameless Warrior comes from a clan of forgotten people called the Guardians of Peace. I mean, this is kind of a spoiler initially because our character has amnesia, but this is all kind of just revealed very quickly. As a guardian of peace, it is our job to find a way to create peace in the land and put an end to the wars and unrest that is currently happening. To do this, we need to fight in a bunch of huge battles and tear through a metric fuck ton of people. The whole Guardian of Peace storyline has its pros and cons. The part that I like is that as a character and a non-canon character, we are able to jump around the story a lot, at least in the beginning. The game lets you experience the story from a bunch of different angles that you normally wouldn't in a Dynasty Warriors game, as most characters are tied to a single plot or faction. Additionally, the story is told at a lot slower of a pace. Instead of the Yellow Turban Rebellion and Hulao Gate being the first 2 levels of the game, they are instead the conclusions to the first 2 chapters of the game. The Yellow Turban Rebellion happening at around the 5-hour mark, and the Hulao Gate storyline finishing at around the 10-hour mark of the game. The time spent before is doing a lot more groundwork to really build up to these massive, conclusive, iconic battles that we know and love, and this works wonders. Hulao Gate is a iconic Dynasty Warriors level, but the way this game sets up and executes this battle is masterful. This level was an absolute highlight of the game for me. And the slower pace of the story really works for me too, because we get to spend a lot more time with the characters of the story, and we really get into character motivations, and the game does a great job of setting up the major story villains. But there is also a lot more time focused on more tertiary characters, which helps round out the world a lot more, even if some of the names thrown around just start kind of blending together after a while. But what doesn't work for me with the story as much is the nameless warrior themselves. In the beginning, there is a lot of lore and mystery around our main character and where they came from, the fact that we have amnesia, and I just don't really care that much. Like I said, the whole Guardian of Peace thing is revealed quite early, and that's kind of just the most important thing you need to know. And the rest of the mystery that gets uncovered is pretty stock standard. It's not so much that I dislike the idea behind it, it just really detracts from the more interesting stuff going on, especially early on in the game, which is always going to be the Three Kingdoms War. I don't think it ever reaches to the point of being bad, but it's just, I felt very indifferent to it. But only when it's kind of center stage. The Guardians of Peace stuff eventually comes into play in what I would call the main story in a way that I really like. And whenever the Guardians of Peace storyline is intertwined with the war, I like it, especially when it comes to the point where the game gives you the choice. Dynasty Warriors Origins puts the choice in your hands in whose side you choose in the war. The game does a good job of letting you spend a decent amount of time with each of the main factions and characters before you're forced into making the choice on who you side with. There are 3 choices in which the storyline will branch off: Shu, Wu, and Wei. As of this review, I've only completed one of the storylines, which was Wu, or how the characters pronounce it, U. Quick sidebar. The English localization team have really stepped it up with trying to get the Chinese pronunciations right with all the names and characters and places. As a longtime fan of the series, it is so strange to hear. I remember the days when Cao Cao was called Cow Cow.
Who cares about Cow Cow?
I mean, I'm kind of all for it, but it's when I hear Lu Bu is now Louis Bu, my brain just kind of starts screaming internally. It's just a lot of the older pronunciations are just kind of ingrained in my mind, so it was a bit of a challenge to hear. Especially that one, Lu Bu. And look, throughout this video, you're probably going to hear me default to the old one, so I chose Wu for my first playthrough, which is unlike me because Shu is almost always my go-to. But right about when the choice came through, where you actually have to make the choice, that I felt the Wu storyline was just more interesting. As I said before, the game does give you a good chance to let you get to know the other factions before you get to that point, but it does feel like the game wants you to choose Shu. And judging off the Steam achievements, the most completed storyline so far is Shu, then Wei, and then Wu last. And Guan Yu is the first main character that you meet, and through there you are introduced to the faction of Shu, and spend a lot of the early game with this lot, and it makes sense that it does feel like the game is nudging you towards that path. But if the other storylines take about as long as the Wu one to complete, then the game will probably run a bit over 50 hours, give or take, to complete all the stories. Each faction's story does have a quote-unquote true ending, which I did complete the Wu one, which required me to beat 2 pretty difficult battles. But the ending, the true ending, wasn't that much different to the normal one that I experienced. I would say it was disappointing, but it wasn't actually that much extra work to unlock. There's just a couple of fun things, extra things to do. Now, when you finish the end of one of the major storylines and beat the game, you are given the ability to go back to different points of the story while keeping your character's progression. Something that is absolutely welcome in this game, and it definitely cuts down on the tedium of starting the game again from scratch. But I do wish I knew of this feature earlier because I made a whole bunch of saves out of fear that I would have to restart the entire game again to do different story routes. And the ability to go back to different points of the game also lets you replay any of the battles that you have played before, which is essentially what the arcade mode in the old games were. As for the quality of the writing in this game, it is more or less the same as every other Dynasty Warriors game, but again, I think the slower pace enriches the world so much more. Although the Wu storyline felt a little kind of anticlimactic, this is mostly because the game finishes at the point where most of the other games would be at their halfway point. This is the trade-off of having the story work at a slower pace. There is a climax, it just kind of happens at a point that I wasn't really expecting, and it leaves the game somewhat open-ended for a sequel or future expansion. I think this is more of a problem for the people who are big fans of the series because they will expect the story to go further than it does. That's not to say that I don't feel like the game offers as much in terms of story again, because 30 hours is more than decent for a first playthrough that has more to offer after that. I've already talked about the gameplay somewhat, but let's dive a bit deeper on how everything works. There are two parts to the game. The first part is the battles, and the second is the overworld. The overworld is the connecting tissue between the story and the battles. This is, I mean, you can see this, right? It shares a striking resemblance to the Tiny Tina's Borderlands game. Being a big man walking around a small scaled down China looks extremely goofy. From the overworld, we can walk around the map and progress the story or fight in small or medium battles that pop up. We can talk to certain officers and raise our bond levels with them. We can buy items, do side missions, etc. Like I said earlier, the presentation is whack, but the thing it does well is that it helps sell how everything is happening geographically. But where this overworld falls short is that it's not that great to interact with. Like with the Tiny Tina game, this shit gets really tedious after a while. And sure, there are a lot of quick travel options, but then it just becomes menu hopping at that point. And the overworld, the system is functional, but it isn't particularly fun. The other part of the game is the battles, and this is absolutely the reason to play the game, and the reason why I'm currently loving my time playing. The scenarios themselves will be very familiar to Dynasty Warriors fans. You are put in a battle with win conditions and lose conditions, and it is your job to turn the tide of battle. Most of the time you are told what the general strategy of the battle is going to be, and then just told to go and do whatever you like. Before you enter a battle, you can choose which weapon you'd like to use. There are a total of 9 weapons which you unlock over the course of the main story. Each weapon has a proficiency level which lets you level up by using the weapon, or that's what I thought to begin with, but after a while I was just kind of earning XP for random weapons I wasn't using, so I don't actually know. What makes this interesting is that your character level is tied to these weapon proficiency levels. This is supposed to encourage you to experiment with all of the weapons, but again, after a while just felt like I was leveling them up randomly. So I don't actually know. But as you level up, you unlock more combos and abilities for each weapon, as well as unlocking new skill trees when hitting certain total level milestones. Each weapon also has its own distinctive style and feel to them. Some weapons like the twin pikes and the crescent blade are great for mowing down large groups of people, while others like the spear or wheels, the wheels are still my favorite weapon in the game, which is great, feel like they're more geared towards like one-on-one battles. Before getting into the game, we also need to choose our battle arts. These are strong abilities that take a resource called bravery to use. Bravery is earned by killing enemies, doing parries and perfect evades, and just playing the game in general. Most of the battle arts are tied to certain weapons. We also have tactic abilities, which are another set of abilities that are instead on a set timed cooldown instead of building up a resource, and these are tied to bodyguards, and these can be used as long as you still have bodyguards alive. And this is probably the first Dynasty Warriors game to actually make good use of the bodyguard system, so props for that. General combat has a lot of mindless hack and slash. Typical light attack, strong attack type gameplay, which you can combo to really tear through enemies. Combat against officers is the way that the game really switches things up. Officers have something called a fortitude bar, which if you manage to break through will let you unleash a bunch of free attacks that do extra damage against them. You can break fortitude by using strong attacks, parrying or battle arts, or just finishing combos on them. Battling officers feels like the biggest change to the core gameplay Dynasty Warriors is known for. And I can't stress enough of how fun it actually feels. Like, depending on the enemy, different weapons have different parry and dodge windows, or attack patterns, and learning how best to deal with an enemy officer is an extremely kind of rewarding process, and that is up until the game just decides to go insane. There is a new addition to the game called large forces. These are kind of self-explanatory. They're just huge concentrated areas filled to the brim with people, but also enemy officers. So trying to dodge, parry, and really deal with about 5 to 10 to 15 enemy officers in a small vicinity, all kind of just spamming their own battle arts and tactician abilities, can kind of just become impossible to deal with, and you can get comboed out pretty quickly. This didn't really happen very often, and I can forgive the game because participating in large battles is the kind of chaos that really makes me fall in love with the game. The eventual way I found out to deal with, the officer spam in large forces is just to use my bullshit moves to clear out as many of them as possible. In typical Dynasty Warriors fashion, we have the Muso ability, which is just the one button press, very strong, uninterruptible attack, which is built up in a similar way that Bravery is. You need to fill a certain amount of the Muso resource bar to be able to use it, but if you opt not to use it and fill the bar all the way to the end, you can activate something called Rage Mode, or otherwise known as Extended Bullshit Mode, because it just lets you not take damage as well as it fills your bravery bar to full, and then at the very end you also just get a free, stronger version of the Muso attack to end it all off. It's extremely bullshit, but I fucking love it. And it only feels fair if sometimes the game throws stuff at you that is almost impossible to handle, that you can do the same back. Something I also wanted to mention is that when large battles happen, you can often participate in what is called a charge, which is this cinematic, charge at the enemy forces, and it really feels like you're in that scene from the second Lord of the Rings movie at Helm's Deep, where Gandalf just rides in at the end into the orcs. Anyway, if you are starting to think that this game is pretty overloaded with mechanics and systems, and that's because it kind of is. But Dynasty Warriors Origins doesn't introduce everything at once, like I just did. It is done over time in a, I would say, very steady and satisfying pace. A lot of the other games in the series will just drop all of these systems on you at once, and that's it. Origins has a good sense of progression, and even though it feels like I may have missed some things or not used some mechanics to their full potential, I can always look at the glossary, which, to be honest, could be formatted a little better, but progression feels very rewarding in this game. Everything Dynasty Warriors Origins does gameplay-wise is something that the series has done before or dabbled with, but really refined it and upped the scale to a point where I would say that this is one of the most extensive and well-crafted Dynasty Warriors games of all time, with the exception of one thing, and that is playable characters. Before I said in the video that the game only had one playable character, kind of. After a certain point of the story, you are able to take in a companion to fight in battles alongside you. They will hang around nearby and fight with you, and they can do follow-up attacks on battle arts as well as use combo Muso attacks if they fill their bar up to a certain point. If their Muso bar also gets to full, then you can actually swap to that character and then play as them for a small amount of time. They also get their own Rage Mode and Muso finisher ability, but once that ends, you take back the Nameless Warrior and then just carry on in the battle. As a game mechanic, this is super fun. It works, it's great. The characters usually have very powerful battle arts equipped, and that just kind of makes this another extended period of bullshit mode, but with the power fantasy just kind of elevated just a little bit more. But as someone who really likes the Dynasty Warriors cast of characters, I hate that this is all we really get to play of them. Now, in most Dynasty Warriors games, the type of weapon you use is directly tied to a character. Thus, different characters would play differently due to the weapons that they use, but the Nameless Warrior can use every weapon, thus playing as a different character is just going to feel the same as playing the Nameless Warrior in the end. It's really the fact that the companions usually have stronger battle arts equipped, as well as most likely are not going to be using the same weapon that you're going to be using at the time. It kind of hides the fact that they do almost play identically to the main character. I do like the developers tried to at least give us something, and having them be a powerful limited time cameo is a good attempt at giving these iconic characters time to shine. But again, because of the limited number of weapons in this game, a lot of the characters are just missing their signature weapons. Like Zhang He doesn't have his claws, Diao Chan doesn't have a chain whip thing or her weird little mace ball things that she used to have, which is just a little bit disappointing to see. Another thing I wanted to add is that even though the game gameplay representation of the characters has fallen off by quite a bit. Their roles in the story are a lot more expanded. As I said before, you can talk to characters and they'll give you side missions, and there are a lot of cutscenes where you will learn more about the characters and talk with them and stuff. Again, the writing is very, very off. I would say the writing is, not that great. But again, this is very Dynasty Warriors. This is the same game series that features cutscenes like this.
To our great fortune, Zhuge Liang has finally passed on. Victory is ours. Now, everyone, show your joy, not with your blade, but with a dance!
The characters in Dynasty Warriors Origins, when they talk to you, just kind of have this endless admiration for the nameless warrior, and it just feels like it's a lot of dick riding on every character will just talk to you and be just like, you're the fucking best, let's spend the night together. And it's got a weird kind of almost sensual tone to it. Funnily enough, it just feels like all the characters want to bang you. And they maybe do. A lot of the time when you talk to other officers, the scene will end with like, oh, let's spend the night together drinking and talking or whatever and just being each other's company. And it's like, oh, this is a bit much. It's odd, but again, it's just Dynasty Warriors. It's really just what this game series has been doing forever. That's all I have to say on the gameplay front, so let's switch gears to the music. This is arguably the thing that has changed the least over the many years that this series has existed. This game is no different, it's fantastic. The metal rock melodies that accompany the battle music is a staple of the series and it has not changed. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's amazing, love it. Though Origins also features some more atmospheric, kind of oriental orchestral score during the cutscenes that, while good, aren't always matching the tone of the story or what's happening during the scene. That would be more of a problem if the voice acting or writing were better to begin with, but because it's all really campy, it's not really a problem at all. It just kind of adds to the overall kind of whack nature of the game, it's fine. Moving on to graphics, Dynasty Warriors as a series has never been the best looking games of their generation. A lot of the time they are sacrificing graphic fidelity to get more bodies on screen. It's easy to say that this is the best looking Dynasty Warriors game to date because it really should be considering the time between this game and the last, but it is also up to the amount of characters and just in general things happening on the screen that we've ever seen before. And if I hadn't played Space Marine 2 a few months ago, then I would have been seriously impressed that this game is able to run so well while having so much stuff on screen at once and still look decent without making some major sacrifices to performance. I am running this game in 1440p with RTX 4070 Super, and I did not experience any slowdown or any hitches in performance at all. And that is while recording with OBS on top of playing. I usually do give a bit of leeway when it comes to performance if I'm recording and playing at the same time due to not having a secondary recording PC setup, but this game doesn't need it. It just runs fantastically. As for if this game can run on the Steam Deck, it can, albeit with a much more scaled down graphic fidelity, which is to be expected. I played a couple of battles on the Steam Deck and it played fine. So the question of if you can play it on Steam Deck, the answer is yes. But the question of if this is how you'd want to experience this game, then I would say probably not. This is a pretty button-mashy, fast-paced game, and I find that these are the kind of games that will go a long way into wearing out my controller if I play them for an extended period of time. The Steam Deck is a sturdy device, but I reckon if a game is going to wear out the buttons and joysticks fairly quickly, it's going to be a game like this one. That, and I feel like this is a game that really works on the big screen, especially when it comes to feeling the scale of the game. That being said, the option is there. If you do want to play this on Steam Deck, you can. While playing the game, I came across a couple of minor graphical glitches. Surprisingly enough, they only really happened in cutscenes, so I wasn't too worried about it. Other than that, I feel like the game looks good and it runs very, very well. In conclusion, Dynasty Warriors Origins is not a perfect game, but I am a firm believer that the positives far outweigh the negatives, most of which are ignorable, at worst slightly tedious or a little disappointing. The only thing that stops me from straight up recommending this game is the price. It is a bit on the expensive side, and if you're a long-time Dynasty Warriors fan like me, I think this game is well worth the price. If you are not, then I might wait for a sale. I do think that the game is worth playing, but at 105 Australian dollars or $65 US, we are on the pricier side of things. I'm certainly satisfied with my purchase of the game, but I do have to acknowledge that I am a big fan of these games. It is very scary to think that I've been playing and enjoying them for almost probably 20 years now. Oh god. And while I have tried to explain all of the little quirks that this series has throughout the review, is someone who is coming into this as their first Dynasty Warriors game going to like and appreciate this game? And I want to say yes. The most important part of this game, in my opinion, is the gameplay. So I feel like if you are currently on the fence, but if you look at the gameplay that has been shown throughout the video, then I do encourage you to give this a try. If you are still somehow not sure, then I would put this on your wish list and then wait for a sale. I would say that you should go and try the demo, but the demo does that thing where it does drop all of the gameplay mechanics on you rapidly. While it does try to teach and show you everything that the game has to offer, it is done at just a rapid fire speed, and it is overwhelming to say the least. So if you do want to give the demo a try, then keep that in mind, that the overwhelming nature of how the demo kind of throws everything at you isn't really a final representation of how the game actually is. I do recommend you download the demo if you're unsure if your PC can run the game. Dynasty Warriors Origins is available now on PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox. It is a very fun time, and as a long-time Dynasty Warriors fan, this absolutely ranks among the best that the series has to offer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, then please consider dropping this video a like, and if you are new and want to see more, then subscribe. If you have played Dynasty Warriors Origins, then let me know what you thought of the game in the comments. Thanks to my YouTube members, Controlled Killer, Yellow and Melodia. If you think my content is worth supporting via YouTube membership, the option is there. Perks are on the screen. I also have a community Discord, which is free to enter, as well as a Steam curator page. Links to everything in the description below, and if you have any ideas for future games you want me to cover, then leave a comment. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time.